Okay, we're going to look at 8-6 worksheet number 2, and this is going to be the video answer key for you. Okay, so looking at number 1. Okay, so we're going to start with our list here. So list of factors of 2 would just be 1 times 2. Okay, and then the list of factors of 7 would just be 1 times 7. Okay, now remember you're doing your outside times your inside. So we have 7 times, or 7 and 2, that's not going to give us a 15. Okay, so remember when something like that happens, remember you've got to flip. Okay, so now I've got 2 times 7 is 14, and 1 times 1 is 1. Now keep in mind that your signs, you either got to have a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. So in this case, it would have to be a negative negative. Same sign means we're going to be adding. Okay, so then that works. 1 and 14 would get you 15. All right, and so then we write down, right, here's your first option. So 2n and 1n. Okay, on the back side, you have a 1 and a 7. Keep it in order, 1 and 7. And then we already talked about both those are negative. Now, keep in mind, I'm not going to do a check on every single problem here, but you technically are checking these to make sure that you've got your signs, your numbers, everything is correct. Okay, so now I look, does that get me back up to there? Yes, it does. So here is your answer right here. All right, on number 2, again, make a list. So 1 times 7. Now on the 30, we're going to have 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, and 5 times 6. Okay? So now our signs, again, it's either going to be addition or subtraction. We're going to be going with subtraction since it's a negative right there. So if they're the same sign, we add. Same sign, we add. All right, so looking at inside, outsides again. And I'm going to kind of skip around here and see if I can find something. Okay, let's look here. So if I got a 1 times 10, that's 10. 7 times 3 is 21. So now when I add those up, that gets me 31. So here's the combo 1, 7, 3, 10 that I'm going to use. So I've got 1n, 7n, I've got 3 and 10. And again, we already know that both of these should be negative. Keeping in mind, we do expect you to kind of just double check, make sure that what you have here is correct, because there's so many places we could have made a mistake. So we just want to confirm that our signs, numbers, everything looks good. Does this get me back to a negative 31 in the middle? Yes, it does. So there's your answer. Okay, on number 3 here. Okay, so again, we're starting our list. So I've got 1 times 4, 2 times 2, 1 times 6, and 2 times 3. Okay, so now I'm kind of working inside, outsides here, right? So I get 1 times 6 is 6, and 4 times 1 is 4. Now I know that's not going to be 5, but let's backtrack for a second. Our signs, we should have had a positive negative, all right, which means we're going to subtract. So either way, though, that's not going to work, okay? So then we go to the next one here. Let's see if I'm able to erase this. Oh, yep. So I'm going to kind of erase this because I forgot to arrow out of it. Oops, best I can. All right. All right, so. Okay, so that doesn't work. So then we go to the 1 times 3 and get 3, 2, 8. Oh, yeah, that might work. Okay, so we know that we've got to subtract. We know that we need 8 positives and 3 negatives to get a 5. So there's my combination that will work. So I've got a 1x and a 4x. I have got a 2 and a 3. Now, keeping in mind your inside, outside, here's my outside, right? So we know that that needs to be a negative 3. And then on my insides here, I want a positive 8. Okay? Again, worst comes to worst, double check it. If your signs are wrong or things aren't quite right, then you can fix it. So we got 4x squared minus 3x plus 8x minus 6. Oh, and you know what? By checking it, guess what I found out? I forgot my y's. If I go back here and look, you see we got a y here and a y here, and I didn't have my y's in there. So by checking it, it caught my mistake for me. So I'm going to go ahead, oops, not that guy. I'm going to go ahead and write in my y's, now my answer, and now my answer's correct. Okay, so there is a reason we check it. Okay, Number 4, okay, again, we're going to go ahead and start our list. And yep, 90 is going to be a big one because there's no GCF here. So I've got 1 times 6, 2 times 3. And then on my 90, I've got 1 times 90, 2 times 45, 3 times 30. 4 won't go. Let's see how many 5s go in. 5 times 18. Divide by 6 and get 6 times 15. 7 won't go, 8 won't go, and then 9 times 10. So man, there's a lot to check on this one, okay? So let's go ahead though, let's think about our signs here real quick. So we know that we have to have a positive, negative, so different signs means we subtract. So we're gonna subtract to get a 90 here. And I'm gonna go ahead and not go through every single one here. I'm gonna kind of focus on the 2, 3, all right? And I'm gonna do, let's do 2 times 10. That would have been 20, and 3 times 9 is 27, okay? So now that I'm looking at that, I know I need -7, so I have a -7 and a positive 20. So I got 2, 3, 9, 10 combo here. So I've got a 2x, a 3x, I've got a 9, a 10, and then I've got a -27. So here's my 27, I want that negative, and then the 2x and the 10 should be positive. Okay, again, you'll want to show a check. So you'll get 6x squared plus 20x minus 27x minus 90. And then double check, does that work with up here? And yes, it does. Moving on to number 5. Okay, so now on number 5, love GCFs on these types of problems because they're going to make your options so much less. So on this one, you had to pick up that you were supposed to pull a 4 out. So you're going to get a 9a squared minus 12ab minus 5b squared. And now all of a sudden making lists of 9s and 5s aren't so bad. So we're going to do 1 times 9, 3 times 3, and then we are going to do 1 times 5. Okay, so again, we have different signs, so addition, subtraction, so we know that that's going to be subtraction, right? Or sorry, positive, negative, we know that's going to be subtraction. And we need to figure out how to get a -12 out of this. Okay, so what popped to me right away was 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times 1 is 3. That would definitely subtract if I make that a negative. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use the 3, 3, 1, 5 combo here. So I'm going to get a 3a on the fronts of both here. I've got a 1b and a 5b. Okay, and then since I need my 15s to be negative, again, I look to the outside here, and I see that that's a 15AB, so that's going to be my negative. And then on the inside here, this 1B and 3A, that would be the positive, okay? And that's going to be my answer. Again, you'll need to check it. I ran through a check on problems 1 through 4 if you want to go back and watch how to check. Okay, so on number 6, holy moly, these are big numbers. Okay, I will give you a little hint here. Sometimes when you've got really big numbers, we're actually going to be talking about this in the next lesson. Sometimes just take a look at the square root and see if that works first. So it would be 13 times 13, 8 times 8. And so what I'm going to do is just see if that works first. If not, then I'll make a list. But making a list of 169, 64 is rough. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take 13 times 8. And get 104 when I do that. And so then 13 times 8 would also be a 104. So yay! I'm so glad we did that one first. So we've got 13x and 13x, all positives, so all positives, and then 8 times 8. Now, if you wanted to write that as 13x plus 8 squared, that would be the exact same thing. Okay, and then obviously you would need to do a check just to confirm your answer. Okay, on number 7, again, big numbers, look for those GCFs. So you should have pulled out a 5 to start with. So you'll have 9n squared minus 12n plus 4. So again, we're making a list. 1 times 9, 3 times 3, 1 times 4, and 2 times 2. Okay, so we do our inside, outside. So when I'm looking, if I know I need a 12, I'm kind of searching, looking right here, because this will give me a 6 and a 6. All right, and so we know that it has to be a negative, negative, because a negative times negative is a positive, and then that gets us the negative in the middle, okay? So I've got a 5 for the GCF on the outside. I've got a 3n minus 2, and a 3n minus 2. Now, you might see him write it as 3n minus 2 squared. That's the same thing, okay? And then you would need to run through your check to make sure that your answer is correct. Okay, number 8 is also a GCF problem. In this case, you can only pull a 2 out. So I'm going to pull a 2 and get 3x squared minus 38 plus 80. Oh, x, forgot my x there. Okay, so now I'm going to run through a list. So I got 1 times 3. 80 is a little rough. That's usually got a lot. Let's see. So 3 won't go in. And then 4 times 20. And then I'm going to divide by 5 and get 16. Yep, 5 times 16. 6 won't go, 7 won't go, so then 8 times 10. All right, so, well, a negative 38. So when I'm kind of just glancing my inside-outside numbers here, I don't find anything that works right off top. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it. Here we go. And then 3 times 10 is 30. 8 times 1 is 8. That would work because if I go back and look at my signs, I need a negative, negative, and we know that that's going to be addition since they're the same sign. So I'm going to go ahead and work on the 3, 1, 8, 10 combo here. So I've got a 2, 3x, 1x. We already know they're both negatives, and then an 8 and a 10. And again, you would need to run through your check. Okay, so on this one, this is kind of just a hot mess. It's not like a nice, pretty trinomial we're really going to do much with. So the only thing we're probably going to be doing on this one is just pull a GCF, and we'll see what we've got, but chances are that's all we'll do. So when I'm looking at this problem here and doing my GCFs, I'm going to pull out 3, looks like. 3, and then let's look at my letters. And then I have a B5, B3, B, so I'm going to pull out one of the B's. So I'm going to get 10, B to the 4th, minus 3, B squared, A squared, plus 2, okay? Now, this guy right here is not, it's not a quadratic. There's no way to factor something that has A's and B's in it with B's here, but nothing on the last one. So that's your answer. All you had to do was pull out a GCF on that one. All right, so GCF on this one. So if it's a 2-part problem, there's only 2 things we can do. First one is pull a GCF. We get 16x squared minus 1 when we do that. And then the second thing we can do is check for difference of squares. So can I square root, and do I have a negative in the middle? Yes, to all of that. So you get a 5, 4x minus 1, and 4x plus 1, because that's what's the difference of squares. Okay, number 11. Okay, so on this one, there's a couple of things we could talk about on this. First off, 7 pops in my mind. That's what we need to pull out. But this is v squared. It is a trinomial. So I'm going to go ahead, I guess, and rewrite it as 21v squared plus 70v minus 7, just to get it into standard form. I'm going to go ahead and pull a 7 out and get 3v squared plus 10v minus 1. Okay, and now because it is a perfect or a quadratic, right? It's got an exponent of 2 right there. Okay, I have to look at my factors and make sure I can't go any farther. Well, in this case, there's not a lot we can do here because it's a 1 and a 3, right? 1 times 1 is 1, 3 times 1 is 3. That's never going to get us a 10. So the only thing we could have done here is just pull out a 7. Now, if you didn't change the order around and you pulled out, let's just say a 7, then you would have a negative 1 plus 10v plus 3v squared. I would have also accepted if you chose to pull out a negative 7 and get 1 minus 10v minus 3v squared. That would have been fine as well. So there's kind of a lot of things I would have accepted on that one. Okay, number 12, first thing I'm looking for here is a GCF. Looks like I can pull a 3 out. So I've got x squared minus 2xy minus 80 y squared. All right, so now I'm looking for factors of negative 80, right, that are going to add to negative 2. So 8 and 10 pop into my head right away. Like I said, you don't need to do a list unless you can't come up with the factors kind of quickly. But then I'm thinking, all right, so if I make it a negative 10, 8 times negative 10 is negative 80, and 8 plus negative 10 is negative 2. So yeah, that looks pretty good. I forgot my parenthesis there. So keep the 3 on the outside. X squared is going to break down to x and x. We know that we've got a positive 8 and a negative 10, and then tack the y's on the back side. All right, number 13 here. Again, I'm looking for factors of negative 18 that get me negative 7. So 9 and 2 pop into my head right away there. And then I probably need more negatives to get the negative 7. All right, so now if I multiply negative 9 and 2, I get negative 18. And when I add negative 9 and 2, I get negative 7. So that's looking good. So I get x minus 9 and x plus 2 here. Okay. So on this guy, a lot of people like to try to do different to squares. There's so many things that are wrong with this. It's got a plus sign, so there's definitely not a different to squares. Also, there's no square rooting a 5 or an x if it's got a 1 on it. Okay, so there's so many things wrong for this to be a different to squares. But what I can do is pull out an x and get x plus 5 left. Now, once you have an exponent of 1 right here, you're done. You don't need to do anything else. And that's your answer. Okay, so again, looking for factors of negative 48 that get us a positive 2. 6 and 8 pop in real quick there, and I think a negative 6. So if I have negative 6 and 8, that would be a positive 2. And when I take negative 6 times 8, that gives me negative 48. So p minus 6 and p plus 8 is your answer there. Okay, on number 16, looks like we've got a GCF again, so let's pull a 2 out. So I've got p squared minus 12p plus 27. How about our signs would need to be a negative negative here. So how about 3 and 9? So negative 3 and a negative 9 would get me a negative 12 when I add and gets me a positive 27 when I multiply. So I'm going to get 2, p minus 3, and p minus 9 as my answer. Okay, so on this guy, I'm looking for GCF, but there's not one. So I'm going to go ahead and group, keeping that negative with that 8. And I'm going to pull out a 3x squared here. So I get 2x plus 5. On the second guy here, I'm going to pull out a negative 4. And that's going to turn it over to all positives to a 2x plus 5. So I get 3x squared minus 4 and 2x plus 5. And on this guy, I've got subtraction in the middle. There is no GCF, and I can square root both parts. So this is a difference of squares. So I have 5x minus 3 and 5x plus 3. And that concludes the answer key for 8-6 worksheet number 2.